Hey, everybody. Welcome to day one of Teacher Read at Home. As you know, we've been reading the Titanic, the first one in the series of three. I'm going to start off by rereading the last couple paragraphs from the chapter that we had left off on, so you can kind of jog your memory and remember what we've been reading about. So, Paddy nodded weakly, but in his mind, a discordant note had disturbed the regular thrum of the ship's engine. No amount of experience mattered on board the Titanic, which was so much bigger than everything else afloat that she could pull full-size steamers clean out of their secure berths merely by lumbering past. Only Titanic experience mattered, and since this was the maiden voyage, no captain had that. Does anybody really know how to sail this boat? He wondered. Now we'll start our next chapter, chapter 11. RMS Titanic, Wednesday, April 10th, 1912, 8:45 p.m. Papa, if we don't go now, we shall miss dinner. The Earl of Glamford dismissed his daughter with a shuddering of the two fingers that were not cradling his poker hand. Juliana flinched as her father signed another chit and tossed it in the center of the table. When Papa was embroiled in a card game, the rest of the world simply did not exist. So now we're looking at this from Juliana's perspective. And you remember that her dad is a very rich earl, kind of like royalty. And he is kind of a daredevil. And Juliana is too. But their mother would not go on board the Titanic with them. Another hand, more money into the pot. Juliana was not privy to the Glams' financial worries, but she would have to have been deaf and dumb not to know they existed. It did not take a chartered accountant to see that her father's fondness for gaming, and his lack of skill at it, was a large part of the problem. She looked around the sumptuous dark paneling of the first-class lounge. The luxurious attention to the tiniest detail was impressive, even to someone reared in a family whose nobility stretched back centuries. Yet all Juliana saw were the card games, poker and bridge, grim-faced players, handwritten markers changing hands in lieu of banknotes. How can I get Papa out of here? She leaned close to her father's ear. Please, it's not proper for me to go to dinner unaccompanied. Quite right. Without glancing up, the Earl snapped his fingers and a hovering steward came running. Yes, sir, may I help you? Kindly accompany Miss Glam to the dining saloon and see that she is seated. I shall join her shortly. Face burning with humiliation, Juliana left the lounge on the arm of a steward who was not 1 hour older than she. Even worse, the young man was very much aware of her discomfort. Don't feel bad, miss. When the gentlemen get into the gaming, it's nigh impossible to regain their attention. They wouldn't notice if the ship was sinking. Juliana was in no mood to be soothed. This ship is unsinkable, she snapped. Well, then, they've got nothing to worry about, he returned softly. She stared at him in surprise. You have a lot to say for yourself. It was the boy's turn to flush. Most dreadfully sorry, miss. I didn't mean to be rude. And so you weren't, she assured him, ashamed of her ill-tempered behavior. You were trying to be kind, and I appreciate it. He was nice, but, of course, he was paid to be. Juliana had grown up with servants her whole life. She was fond of some of them, and respected most of them. But their function was no different from that of any other useful item, like a broom or a motor car. They descended the magnificent grand staircase, brilliantly lit and dazzling. Other passengers in evening clothes and white gloves, their jewels aglow, passed them on the broad steps, chattering, smiling, relaxed. At Cherbourg, France, more passengers had embarked, most of them wealthy Americans returning from the Europe social season. I'm happy to escort you to your table, miss, the steward told her. If there might be anything you need, just ask for Alfie, and they'll come and get me. He swept her into the glittering dining saloon. I thought that was probably Alfie. I was right. Juliana had heard that this was the largest single room on any ship ever. She could see now that this description was absolutely true. Drenched with thousands of electric lights and centerpiece candles, fragrant with flowers and alive with music, the vast space took her breath away. There were so many tables, so many elegant diners. The world's elite, really. How was it possible that Alfie was escorting her to this table? Seated there was that girl she had watched aboard the ship, the one who, along with her mother, had been brought to the Titanic by the police. "Perhaps this is the wrong table?" she asked pointedly. The problem passed miles above Alfie's understanding. He saw just two young ladies in charming evening gowns. The fact that one was the daughter of an earl and the other was being deported from the country was beyond him. What could a glam possibly have to say to such a person? Alfie seated her and withdrew. A waiter appeared and draped a snowy linen napkin across her lap. "You're alone too," Sophie observed. Now we remember Sophie is the character whose mom is a suffragist fighting for women's rights, and they were starting protests, and that's why England was kicking them out of the country. Juliana inclined her head. "For the moment, my father, the Earl, will be joining me shortly. My mother, too. She's in the smoking lounge, puffing on a cigar." Sophie noted the other girl's shocking disapproval. "Well, probably not the cigar, but you can bet your last penny she's having a political argument with some men who are growing angrier by the minute. That's the effect mother has on people." "Is that why those constables?" Juliana blurted. She bit her lip and said no more. Sophie looked sheepish. "I was hoping nobody noticed that. Your English police aren't sympathetic to votes for women, and that's my mother's passion. It means more to her than anything, certainly more than her daughter." In spite of herself, Juliana experienced a twinge of sympathy. At this moment, she was lower on Papa's list of priorities than a deck of cards. She glanced at the gilded clock. Where was he? He'd promised to follow her in short order. Part of her suspected that he had no intention of coming at all. For Rodney, Earl of Glamford, a poker game was an all-night affair. "Well, at least you're on your way home now," Juliana offered kindly. "I'm sure your cause is more popular in America." Sophie sighed. "It's not. The only difference is when mother is arrested in America, father is on hand to post her bond." She regarded Juliana curiously. "Is this a pleasure trip for you?" "I'm accompanying my father. He has business in America." "Oh, what cities will you be visiting?" Sophie asked. It dawned on Juliana that she had no idea where they would be going or what the nature of her father's business might be. She knew they were to be met in New York by Mr. Hardcastle, who owned oil wells. But Papa wasn't in the oil business, was he? Surely not. Papa wasn't in any business. A splendid gentleman who seemed to have gained 40 pounds since being measured for his tuxedo arrived at their table. "Bless my soul," he roared through reddish mutton chop whiskers, seating himself across from the girls. "That I should be so fortunate as to be placed with such an abundance of delightful female company, each one more lovely and charming than the other. I shall become distracted trying to decide which one of you will be first to honor me with the pleasure of a dance." The image of being steered around the dance floor, backing away from that ample belly, nearly caused Juliana to laugh in the gentleman's face. She looked over at Sophie and saw that the American girl was having the same struggle. Perhaps the daughter of an earl and an American deportee had something in common after all. Now, before we end for the day, I want you to kind of summarize in your mind what we read. You can start with that Juliana was hoping her father would stop playing cards. Go ahead. And maybe you can make a prediction about what might happen with Juliana. Oh my goodness, I just forgot the other girl's name. Was it Stella? Sophie. So maybe you can make a prediction about how Sophie and Juliana's friendship will evolve. Will they be friends? Sounds like they have a lot in common, even though they originally thought they didn't. So tomorrow I will send another email to your mom and dad, and I will also post another video. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel that I'm starting, so that way anytime I post a new read aloud or a new class activity, you always have access to it. Love you guys. See you soon.